Hello, and welcome to History Stories. I'm Dr. Megan Easley-Walsh, and in this episode, we're looking to the skies with my novel, North Star Home. Do you know where the oldest solar observatory in the world is? If you guessed Ireland, you're right. Newgrange is 5,000 years old. 1,000 years older than Stonehenge, and 500 years older than the pyramids of Giza. The ancient Irish of the Boyne Valley intimately knew the skies, watching the movement of the sun to know when to plant their crops. Ireland's first farmers were during the Neolithic era, and the monuments they constructed, such as Newgrange, built upon the settled community spirit. In my novel North Star Home, Anne Scarlett looks to the night sky, using the North Star as a guiding point. She remembers the story of her youth when her slave friend Sally spoke of following the drinking gourd, another name for the Big Dipper constellation. I spent a lot of time camping growing up, and I too looked to the sky, seeing the familiar constellations as I moved across the world. For Anne in North Star Home, the stars are her companions as she journeys west to seek to amend the losses that her family has suffered. I think that Anne would appreciate the genius of the Neolithic Irish in their building of Newgrange. Over 5,000 years later, it is still a place that can be visited and walked around inside of, and where Neolithic art, including the characteristic tri-spiral, are visible. Amazingly, in over 5,000 years, the roof hasn't leaked. That's quite a feat in rainy Ireland. I think that Anne would also appreciate the determination of the builders. The collective efforts of the earliest farmers also speaks to the community spirit that Anne encounters in Red River Rock Falls. In Season 1, Episode 7, we spoke about the community spirit inherent in quilts and the collective gathering of material. Constellations in their own way can be thought of as a patchwork in the sky. No matter where you find yourself in the world, seeing familiar constellations can offer the comfort that a quilt might. Here's more about North Star Home. Anne Scarlett is no thief, but when the Yankee sheriff catches her, she might just steal his heart. Resourceful and devoted Anne Scarlett is on a mission: retrieve her family's land deed that was stolen. Leaving Savannah in 1875, she journeys into the Wild West. With her horse, she's guided by her determination and her heart. Sheriff Cranber has loved and lost before. He's not making that mistake again. Life in Nebraska is a welcome change from fighting for the Union. There's plenty to keep him busy with being the sheriff. Things like catching Anne Scarlett red-handed. Anne doesn't seem like other criminals. For one thing, her manners are more polite and she smells a lot better. Not to mention that her nose scrunches adorably and she's beautiful. Maybe she just needs a little rehabilitating. Then again, maybe the sheriff is the one who's being reformed as Anne begins to thaw his frozen heart. I'll leave you with the opening of North Star Home, when a plan is hatched and goes awry. It also reflects well on the idea of keeping literature in a circular conversation of endings and beginnings. Where Anne's plans end, the real adventures begin. Nebraska, 1875. Anne Scarlett hiked up her skirt and mounted her chestnut mare. She'd been on the trail since the sun had first stretched its rays lazily over the horizon. Though Destiny, her horse, was tired and the heat of the day dampened her collar, she pushed forward. Today was the day. Red River Rock Falls didn't know it yet, but Anne Scarlett had chosen this day to make her mark on the town. Sheriff Eliza Whitaker's hold on the town had loosened over the years. Red River Rock Falls had once been the most fiercely guarded town west of the Missouri. That at least was the rumor. The men that she rode with, the cowboys and ranchers that had taught her to rope a steer and sing to keep the cows quiet at night, talked of old Whitaker as the fastest draw in the West. No outlaw dared to cross his path. No man ever had. But Anne Scarlett was no man, and she dared. As the sun sloped below the tree line, Anne's heart thumped in anticipation. One more night under the stars, this time alone, without the cowboys for company, and then she'd be there. Whitaker would be within reach, and Anne would finally have a means of putting her family back together. Since her uncle had passed, Adam, her brother, was the only family that Anne had left. With Adam falling into a trap of dead ends with his life, it was up to Anne to set things right. Whitaker had what Adam had lost, and Anne would get it back. Then Adam could have his life back again, and all would be set right. Life in the East and Savannah had crumbled during the war. Already orphaned, Anne and Adam had lived with their uncle. He was kind to them, but owned a plantation. Anne couldn't reconcile her love for the man with the hatred of how he earned his livelihood. She had been silently pleased when her friend Sally and the other slaves had escaped, and she'd prayed fervently that they were doing better in a free land farther north. But Anne had been devastated when the Yankee troops had marched through her beloved Savannah, and though she hated how her uncle earned his money, she had been heartbroken when so much of the beautiful land and house had been swallowed in Yankee flames. Sherman had marched the sea straight through Anne's childhood. Too disheartened by all that had happened, and returning from the war with a serious wound, their uncle had not lived long past the Yankee victory. Adam, older than his sister but not wiser, had inherited the lands upon their uncle's death. He was a man who had grown up with prospects of wealth only to be faced with a sudden depression. Adam had his own battle scars, as so many did. He also was a man who was surrounded by squalor, without a means of making his livelihood. Debts had piled on as he tried to fix their home. Then the gambling had come. Anne knew that their departed mother would have been heartsick about Adam's poor choices. But then even the first Adam had sinned, and somehow found a way back to redemption. Anne was convinced that she was that way. All she had to do was get to Whitaker and get back their future. Anne pulled a bit of biscuit from her bandana. Hunger pelted her stomach, but she was too tired to much care. She managed to down the crumbs and a few slugs of water from her canteen. Destiny munched heartily on the plentiful grass. "Well, good night, my girl. Tomorrow is what we've been waiting for. It's when our fortunes change." Anne woke as the sun was just nudging over the horizon. She'd waited far too long to delay today's events any more. She pulled a pair of pants from her blanket roll and dressed quickly. A few more bites of biscuit and another swig of water, and Anne was ready. Destiny, here we go. May your name be a lucky charm. When she'd ridden for a few hours more, the desolate lands began to give way to small homesteads. Some houses were constructed of wood, like President Lincoln's old boyhood cabin had been. Others were crafted out of the sturdy sod. From atop Destiny, she watched as a man sawed away chunks of earth and stacked them alongside each other. How wide open the land was that she could observe all this as she rode along. Cutting away his future, little by little. That's what Anne was doing as well. Building up a new home for her and Adam, a place of security, a promise of betterment. The man with the saw drifted away from her vision as Destiny began to climb a gradual incline. The hill was populated with wildflowers of the deepest hues. It was as if each of them were whispering, "Come on, Anne, this way. We'll lead you home." Yes, if all went according to plan, Anne would be on her way back home this very evening. She'd march straight up to Whitaker and request that he return what was hers. Then he'd be an obliging gentleman and hand it to her. After a quick supper, she'd mount Destiny and retrace her path over the past few weeks. By next week, if all went well, she'd be with Adam in the parlor at home. Her mind set on her goal. She gasped as Destiny reached the top of the hill, and Anne saw a town sprawled before her. She dreamed of this, prayed for it, hoped that she'd be able to get back the deed in their land. Now Whitaker was in reach. Right there, right in that valley. That one. The very one in front of her. Her pulse quickened at its proximity, and she pushed Destiny into a gallop. At the edge of town, she slowed Destiny. Dismounting, she tied her to a hitching post and set about finding the man she'd come in search for. Nosing around town did little good for Anne's request. There was no sign of Whitaker. No building was clearly marked as the sheriff's. She figured that someone in the general store would perhaps know something. The store was quiet. A quick scan told Anne that the shopkeeper must have stepped outside or into the storeroom to restock the shelves. Stillness filled these western towns in a way that was foreign to her in Savannah. She was used to the bustle of the city. Yes, on the plantation they were miles from the nearest neighbor. Often Anne had been desperately lonely, especially in the days since the war between the states. But always there were people in the cities and in the stores. She eyed the shelves, wondering if her last provisions would hold, or if she ought to stock up before her return journey. And then she saw it. On a cane chair, leaning against the whitewashed walls, was a stack of papers. At the top was a paper that said, Deeds and Land Holdings. Eureka! Anne said aloud as she reached toward the pile. Under the first papers were bills, large bills. Obviously, this wasn't only the location for the recordings of land deeds, but also where money exchanged hands for the land. Anne had a handful of cash when a voice interrupted her. Folks don't take kindly to having their money lifted in Red River Rock Falls. This here is a respectable town, sir. Sir. She was fooling the shopkeeper or whoever had stumbled upon her. Good. If she didn't turn, then maybe she could get away without ever being noticed. Or she could try to explain. No, running seemed like a better option. Too much talk got one into trouble. That, at least, had always been Anne's experience. No, the sooner she got out, the better. Anne's nose tickled from the mountains of dust. Would it kill someone to keep the papers clean? She held her breath, trying to hold back the sneeze, but to no avail. Out it came. More than just the feminine sound gave her away. She sneezed so hard that her hat tumbled off her head and down flowed her hair. She made a grab for her hat, but the man was too fast. He wore a sheriff's badge, and at first she thought that she ought to change her mind, and that explaining could be a very good thing, having found Whitaker. But something was off. The man in front of her was young, much younger than Whitaker was supposed to be, and he was tall, so tall. She looked up at him as he held her hat. Ma'am, I should say. He corrected himself quickly and handed her the hat. Anne is a surprise when she turns up in Red River Rock Falls, but she soon encounters her own surprises as well. Sometimes the unexpected path, if accompanied by the familiar guiding light, can offer the best destinations. Back in Newgrange, the light box that the Neolithic built still continues to welcome light each winter solstice, illuminating the chamber. Their guiding light continues 5,000 years later. Hold on to what's important to you. I look forward to joining you for more history stories in the next episode. Until then, keep looking at the stars.